That's crucial, and that's a question that's on every alfalfa grower's mind these days. We've had a lot of challenges keeping alfalfa in the stand, and persistence is an issue. In fact, so much of an issue that we are getting ready to advertise a position solely for the look at persistence of alfalfa, trying to deal with winter kill, trying to solve that problem finally after many years of trying.
Welcome back to another episode of the Dairy Podcast Show. My name is Barry Bradford at Michigan State University, and today I'm very much looking forward to talking with Dr. Dennis Hancock. Dr. Hancock is the director of the U.S. Dairy Forage Research Center in Madison, Wisconsin. He came to the center in January of 2020 after serving as a professor in the Crop and Soil Sciences Department at the University of Georgia. And he also served as the state forage extension specialist there from 2006 to 2020. Dr. Hancock, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
So I wonder if we could start with, can you explain, maybe not everybody listening understands what the Dairy Forage Research Center is and how it fits within the overall research infrastructure in the U.S. Can you give us some background there, please?
Sure. So the U.S. Dairy Forage Research Center is located in Madison, Wisconsin, but it serves the entire U.S. Dairy industry. What's unique about the Dairy Forage Research Center is that we have an integrated approach to our research. In other words, we have all the disciplines represented, and when we work on a project, it is very interdisciplinary. It's not siloed within a particular discipline. It is very interdisciplinary. As you know, anyone that's been on a dairy farm, especially dairy farmers, know life is complicated and these things interact. And so that's why we have that set up that way. The Dairy Forage Research Center is part of the USDA Ag Research Service, or ARS. And we've been active here in Madison since 1981. They built the facility in 1980 and first started hiring scientists in 1981.
Great. And how exactly does it interact with the University of Wisconsin?
Well, we're based on the campus. We have a building on campus at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, but we have also a relationship with them at our research dairy in Prairie du Sac. Prairie du Sac is about 45 minutes northwest of Madison, and they help us to run that dairy. They provide the labor and running all of the animal trials and helping us assist in the animal trial research data collection, etc. They're great teammates with us. We've been working very closely with them ever since I've been here, and they've really been working well. And we have a number of UW faculty who do work at our research farm as well. With that said, we have agreements and collaborations in over 30 different universities across the nation. So we collaborate across many different disciplines and many different locations.
Fantastic. So this is a key leadership role at actually what I consider to be one of the most important research centers supporting the dairy industry in the U.S. How did you get there? What got you on the path studying forages? You know, not too many kids are 10-year-olds saying, I want to study forages. what was your...
Well, to how I got to the center to start with, I would say that I agree with you, and this is a biased opinion now especially, but even before I became the center director, the Dairy Forage Research Center has always been, in my mind, one of the top-tier research institutions serving the dairy and the forage industry. Any reference book that you pick up, almost all the time, you will see references with names of former scientists listed there and current scientists as well. They've had a tremendous legacy, and that's what we're hoping to build upon. And, it builds on my ability or my desire to have an impact on the dairy industry, on the forage industry writ large. And that stems from my upbringing. I'm proud to be one of those kids that was raised on a farm. It wasn't a dairy farm, it was a beef cattle farm. But my playground was our front pasture. And I spent a lot of time out with cows, watching cattle graze, watching what they grazed, thinking about how that all worked and how did they turn grass into beef or into milk. It was fascinating to me, and I ended up going to a little small college called Berea College in Eastern Kentucky. They have a work-study program where you work your way through school and they pay your tuition for your work. And I was able to link up with some folks at the University of Kentucky and found out, I didn't know this before going down there, but there was a research station only about 30 minutes away from where I grew up. And over the summers, I was working for the University of Kentucky as an intern with the forage program in Princeton, in Western Kentucky. And that's where I got bit by the bug. I was surrounded by some mentors there, Dr. Monroe Resnick and Dr. Gary Lacefield. Gary Lacefield is one who's very well known in forage circles, and he really got me enthusiastic about the prospect of turning that into a career. Before that, I had no idea you could make a career out of doing research on grass,
Absolutely. Well, good mentors are always key. I'm glad they gave you the hook there.
Yep.
So my understanding is that maybe one of your deepest areas of expertise is in alfalfa agronomy. What are some of the keys, if you were going to point out a few highlights of key management strategies for alfalfa to give high yields and balance that with good stand longevity?
Yeah, that's crucial, and that's a question that's on every alfalfa grower's mind these days. We've had a lot of challenges keeping alfalfa in the stand, and persistence is an issue. In fact, so much of an issue that we are getting ready to advertise a position solely for the look at persistence of alfalfa, trying to deal with winter kill, trying to solve that problem finally after many years of trying. There are certain keys that we know that will affect and improve persistence. And, talking about my mentor, Gary Lacefield, one of the first things that I was doing, it was working on alfalfa persistence all the way back then. Worked on it in my graduate school's days at the University of Kentucky. And then when I went to the University of Georgia, which Georgia is not an area one thinks of growing alfalfa, getting alfalfa to persist in Georgia taught me a lot about what it takes to get alfalfa to persist. And fertility is the number one criteria, particularly potassium. Potassium fertility is absolutely crucial. We often would talk about in extension meetings about how real estate folks talk about location. Well, for alfalfa, it's potash. It's so crucial to everything that it does, especially as it relates to carbohydrate reserves in the roots. Being able to store those carbohydrates in the roots through the winter, potassium is absolutely crucial to that.
And I assume that would be critical to preventing winter kill?
It is one of the main issues, one of the main criteria to trying to prevent winter kill. The second thing is with harvest management and making sure that we're not just thinking about the top growth, that we're also thinking about what's under the soil surface. And that's particularly true as we go into the fall. And here in Wisconsin and Michigan and the northern states, what we have to be very careful about is our timing of that last cutting. We really have to be careful about cuttings taken after about the first or second week, depending on how far north you are, of September. And if we cut too late, let's say we cut in late September, and that crop begins to regrow a little bit. Well, if it regrows about 6 or 8 inches, it's almost depleted all of its carbohydrate reserves to be able to grow that far. And then it doesn't have anything to grow back in the spring. It's weakened going through the winter. It doesn't have the electrolytes in the roots and the crown to be able to resist freezing damage, etc. So it becomes very challenging. So harvest management in the fall is really crucial, and then harvest management through the year. We in the dairy industry, we tend to harvest alfalfa and that late bud stage, or maybe even in the early bud stage, trying to get that ultra high quality out of it. And that really, over time, will deplete the root reserves of alfalfa. Occasionally, it's nice if we can take a little bit later cutting, something that's gone to, say, the 10% bloom, particularly in the late summer or early autumn. That's when we really see the best benefit to root reserves.
So you mentioned the challenge of growing alfalfa in Georgia and a lot of the years you spent trying to help people do that. I am not much of an expert here, so it's not immediately apparent to me why that would be difficult, because we talk so much in the north about winter kill. So what's the big challenge in the south, and how did you help overcome that?
Well, there's several big challenges in the south. One is that that is a cool season species that's trying to grow really well in extraordinarily high heat and humidity, and especially through the overnights when the temperature is 80, 85 degrees and nearly 100% humidity, the plant actually has difficulties respiring and really being able to handle that kind of stress. Disease pressure is ultra high. The fertility, the soil pH typically is really low. There's the typical soil pH in many of the southern states would be in the low fives. So allowing and making sure that pH is in that 6.5-ish range, it requires quite a bit of lime. Or in the case of Georgia, they have a lot of poultry litter that goes out there. And poultry litter has a lot of calcium in it, as well as buffering of the soil pH, and improves the pH of the soil. And obviously a lot of fertility. So it actually fit pretty well in those systems. We had kind of mastered the process of interseeding alfalfa into Bermuda grass, which they seem to be kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of quality, but together they are a match made in heaven. And that work continues on. We have some colleagues there at the University of Georgia that continue doing some of that. There's some plant breeding work, some grazing work that's done with it as well. But I was able to work with a former plant breeder there to use some varieties that were well adapted to the South and just phenomenal fits to that system down there. So,
oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, it's a different world up here.
Yeah, I've never heard of a Bermuda grass alfalfa intersection. Pretty neat idea.
Yeah, it really works well. It would make some really good beef cattle feed, as well as for dry dairy cows, dairy heifers on that would be really good. And they also include some of that into dairy rations in some farms.
So one reason that alfalfa is nice, if we can get decent persistence, right, is it's a perennial crop. We're not having to, obviously just the cost and the time required to plant a new crop every year, you don't have that. But also what we're hearing more and more about is the advantage of not having to rip up the soil every year, right, with a perennial crop. So there's a few regions in the U.S. where it's common to use perennial grasses for dairy cattle, but for the most part, it's pretty much annual forages other than alfalfa in the U.S. So first of all, can you just talk about, is there a need for us to look at more perennial forages? Is there advantages to that? And if you do think that's the path we need to go down, what's your vision of what that might look like in the future if we can make that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I want to first start with saying that I think in general, we at the Dairy Forage Research Center have gotten a reputation of not really valuing corn silage. and I think people think that we're solely focused on alfalfa and these perennial forages. And we recognize and we value corn silage in the diet. This is not necessarily a, corn silage is bad type of perception that we have. What we're trying to do is to match that. How do we improve that diet and the overall management of the dairy so that we have some ecosystem services, that we have value being put back into the overall soil health development, and that we're not depleting the carbon of the soil, depleting the nutrients of the soil, and also thinking about this in terms of the dairy diet, alfalfa can be very much a major part of that diet. And I'm not just talking to, 10, 15%. I'm talking about it could be the majority of the forage in the diet and still produce a lot of milk. And especially in this day where we are really valuing components and the other aspects of milk beyond just fluid milk, looking at protein and fat content, et cetera, it's really crucial to have some alfalfa or other perennial species in there. The perennial grasses, I think, have a great fit too, and we have historically had a great program with our perennial grass breeding program. We're also getting ready to fill that position again. Mike Castler, our former grass breeder, has retired, and we are in the midst of refilling that position. But those grasses that have been produced over the years are very digestible. They have high fiber digestibility and great agronomics, excellent yield, et cetera. And if you look at the tonnage and the investment in alfalfa, sure, that first year of alfalfa, you're probably not going to pay for that alfalfa in that first year. But, if you can carry that forward 3 years at a minimum and beyond too, in most cases, you're going to really see a profitable crop to be grown off of that alfalfa. The key question to me is corn silage is king. There's no doubt about it, but there's also a place for the queen of forages. And they really match together really, really well in a diet. They also have huge impacts on the ecosystem. And as I was talking about carbon in the soil, being able to incorporate alfalfa into that mix, you're increasing the soil carbon. That increases soil health and microbial activity in the soil. Obviously, with the legume, we're also creating a lot of nitrogen. So corn following alfalfa, there's something magical right there. It's amazing what corn will do following alfalfa, and that extends for 2 years after the alfalfa has been taken out. So it does have value, and what we're focusing in on is how these all fit together into a system, how they can really work as kind of a hand in glove together with corn silage and the other feed ingredients that we have available to us to really maximize productivity and profitability for the dairies.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, part of that long-term vision, I know, is that the center there is planning for a new research dairy. The facilities are being renovated in the future, I guess, in the near future. And I wondered if you could give us kind of a big picture update on that. Like, how did that come to pass, and where are you at in that process, and what's the vision for the future?
Yeah, I appreciate that question because that's something I'm very proud of for the center. We are on the cusp of being able to really do some phenomenal things for the dairy industry going forward and to continue the legacy that we have as a center. The dairy that we currently have was built in 1979, and it shows it. And a lot has changed in the dairy industry since 1979. And I know a lot of your listeners are going to say, well, our dairy's been operational for much longer than that. That's absolutely true. And we recognize that, but we're also trying to ensure that what we do is representative of as much of a background of the dairy industry writ large as we possibly can. So we're going to have a mixture in this new dairy of a variety of different research tools to really mimic in as much depth as we can all manner of dairy systems. We're, for the first time ever in the ARS system, we're going to be able to have robotic milkers. We're going to have 4 robot modules, and we'll be able to do replicated research with those robots. Within each of those 60 cow units, we'll also be able to measure intake on individual animals with the goal of being able to really drill down in what we feed in the robot to match the feed that is in the bunk. And so that we can really fine tune that for that individual cow's needs. That's the goal, is precision feeding down to that individual cow. And there's some good practices going on out in the industry with that right now, but there's still a lot of questions. We get questions all the time about how do we best match what's in the robot to what's in the bunk. So that's one of our main priorities. The second thing is we're still going to have conventional freestalls. We're going to do some replicated pin based research in freestalls. We will have 20 pins of 8 to be able to do a large number of trials. 4 of those will actually be set up to do jerseys, by the way. We do have a herd of jerseys as well as a Holstein herd. So we're able to do some comparisons between those species, or not species, between those 2 different breeds. They sometimes act like 2 different species. They definitely are different. And then we also have tie stalls. We will have 48 tie stalls where we will be doing some very precision, advanced types of research where we would be feeding very precise rations to them, doing infusions even, where we would be measuring things in microliters and parts per million type of research. And then finally, we'll have emissions chambers. Everything these days is talking about the net zero initiative within the dairy industry, and we are committed to assisting that process. We want to get to a net zero greenhouse gas emissions. And one of the ways that we do that is to fine tune what we feed to our dairy animals. And one of the key things that we need to understand is what they produce. So we will have the capacity to do that for individual animals, even to a point of measuring not only methane, but nitrous oxide, nitrogen gas, oxygen consumption, carbon dioxide, maybe even hydrogen sulfide. Those types of things we hope to be able to conduct in those chambers. So in addition to that, we'll have kind of a state-of-the-art campus. What we'll have in that farm is really a campus of buildings where we will be able to do other types of research. We're also going to increase our agronomic research capacity in that new facility. And then, of course, we have to accommodate the farm itself. They have to grow the crop for our 360 cows that we milk, and the dry cows and the heifer stock that we have in addition to that. We will be also grazing with our heifers quite a bit too. So that's going to be something quite new that we're looking forward to integrating into the system too. So yeah, it's exciting. And that's one of the reasons that I came to the Dairy Forage Research Center, is because I knew this was on the cusp. And you know, for me, this is about impact. And one of the things I want to do, I'm sure you probably have a similar philosophy, but I got in this to help dairy farmers. I want to make it where we're providing answers to the real world and something that they can put in place on their dairy. And that's the legacy of the Dairy Forage Research Center. And that's what I'm trying to do, to continue that, or I'm going to die trying. That's the hill I'm going to die on, is to try to get that done. So.
So a few questions. I mean, that's, how comprehensive the tools will be is pretty exciting. Is this going to be in Prairie du Sac? Is that correct?
Yes, it's actually going to be about 5 miles away from where the current dairy is, but it's actually going to be more central to where our crops are located. It's a long story, but the long story short is, when the original dairy was built, there was a Badger Army ammunition plant. The U.S. Army had a ammunition plant that we were able to crop the land, but we couldn't build anything on that land. We had to build off to the side. They exited the property in the late 90s, and they gifted us the land in 2004. And so we are now able to build on that land and move everything a lot more centrally located. And also, by the way, away from the Wisconsin River. If you've ever been to our dairy farm, you know that we're about 300 feet away from the Wisconsin River. It's a terrible place to build a dairy.
Yes, it is.
That was really the only spot that they could go with. So yeah, it will be a lot more environmentally friendly from that standpoint, less risk, and also a great show place. We're really going to be excited to bring visitors to that new facility.
For sure. So you mentioned you knew this was on the horizon even when you took this job. So help us understand a little better, like, is the money already there? Are you in the process of actually starting the building, or where are we at?
Yeah, great question. So this process actually started back in the late 2000s, the first decade of the 2000s. Um, we have a really great stakeholder group who had lobbied Congress to try to get funding to replace that dairy. And originally there was funding available for it, and they went through what is known as developing the program of requirements, which is basically the specs of what we're going to build. And they got that far, and in 2011, the federal budget entered into a spiral, and that money was pulled back. So that was off at that point. And there was a big challenge, a lot of concern about what the future was with the dairy, et cetera. But in 2019 2018 for the FY19 budget, Congress was able to restore that funding, and we were appropriated 72.3 million, which sounds like a lot. It is a lot of money, and we take that responsibility very seriously. But when you start building 18 different buildings to federal standards, too, by the way, it is that money. And dairy farms, dairy buildings are expensive in their own right, and then trying to make sure that we can do research with those facilities is a huge challenge. So right now we are at the 35% design point. So we have reviewed a number of documents at 3 different time points already, and we should receive the 50% documents before the holidays. And we're looking forward to taking a look at the next version of that. And we really ran them ragged during World Dairy Expo last week, running around to various vendors and talking with different companies about what we would be doing in the new dairy. But then we expect to be able to advertise this for bid for construction to put out for bid in the spring, and with hopefully being able to break ground late summer, fall timeframe, and if not, then in the spring of 24. So we should be able to be in it. It's a 30-month build, so it'll probably be late 26, early 27 before we're actually in it. We're counting down the days, believe me.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I empathize with all that, as you know, but it is kind of astounding the amount of work, and I know how much work you're putting in. So on behalf of the dairy research community, thank you for your efforts. It will be exciting to see what can happen at that facility when it's all done.
Well, and we're excited to be able to provide that as a resource, not only for our own scientists, but to other researchers as well. And like I said, we try to do research across the country. In a couple of weeks, I'm going down to Tennessee, and we'll be out at Maryland in a few weeks. And haven't made it over to your shop yet, but I'm hoping to visit with you guys soon too. But we have right now over 30 different collaborative agreements with various universities around. So we like to partner. That's really what this is about: is to integrate our disciplines to really assist everyone to service the dairy industry.
That's fantastic. I will say, yeah, there are. I know enough about the research world that there's allocated funds to support research at your facilities, and I know there are people with situations like that say, I don't need to partner because I have funds already. So I appreciate that that you guys value that and you're looking for ways to collaborate, because I think you end up producing better research by having more people involved.
Absolutely you do, especially when you involve various disciplines that are looking at it from different angles, so that when you go to the farmer and say, this is our proposed solution to your challenge, that you've already thought about it from as many different angles as you possibly can.
Exactly. Very good. Okay. Well, we've kind of got some closeout questions here that we'd like to throw at people a little bit off the wall. So one thing I want to ask you, what's something that you strongly believe in that many people would disagree with?
Ooh. So this is a tough one because I'm probably going to get some flack over this one.
Okay.
There's this notion that that grazing is bad for greenhouse gases, and that grazing cannot be a profitable way of making milk. Let me first say that I believe milk can be made profitably on all ends of the spectrum. I really fervently believe that. I've worked with enough dairy farmers over the years to know that you can do it full confinement and max corn silage and really pouring the inputs, and that can be very profitable. The other end of the spectrum can also be profitable. Every farm is a little bit different in what they can do. But one of the big things is there's a common misconception that any animals that are grazing are just their carbon footprint is through the roof. And that's actually not true. We've done some comparisons where in some of the early work that I did at the University of Georgia, we were comparing conventional dairies to grazing dairies. And in some case studies, we found that per unit of milk, it was basically the same. There really wasn't that much difference. And especially if you consider not just the greenhouse gases, which, by the way, if we're grazing a really high quality diet, a high quality pasture, and supplementing with good quality feeds, that greenhouse gas emissions are relatively minor. But if you look at what's stored in the soil, the carbon footprint of the negative impact on that carbon footprint of socking a lot of carbon down into the soil because of rapid root turnover in that soil, and you're building soil organic matter, it can be really phenomenal. In fact, one of the most highly cited papers that I was involved with was actually ended up in one of the Nature journals. It was looking at the buildup of soil carbon in these grazing systems, and it was at a record rate. There is no other study in literature that shows as much carbon buildup in the soil as we observed in some pasture-based dairies in that study. It is phenomenal what is, and I didn't believe it to begin with either. I thought that it was probably, maybe the top 3 inches it'll build up. But no, it was down several inches deep into the soil, adding tons and tons of carbon to that soil every year. So yeah, that's a popular misconception that grazing is bad for the environment and bad for a carbon footprint. But truth is that we can do all of those systems very well and still aspire to and reach that net zero initiative.
Okay, great answer. All right, our 3 standard closeout questions. First of all, what's your favorite dairy-related book or resource?
Well, that's a great question. I have so many on my desk that it's hard to pick one. I'll tell you one that I'm working on right now. It's a brand new publication on corn silage that some of my colleagues there at the UW and surrounding states have been party to. I think you can get it through the Hordes Dairyman magazine. I'm not trying to advertise. I'm just saying that's where it's published. So that's probably the one I'm reading right now. Probably my favorite of all of the forage dairy books is the one I really started with and got me started in my career, which is the Southern Forages textbook. It was written, co-authored by one of my mentors that I mentioned earlier, Gary Lacefield. And after my first summer working with him, he gave me a signed copy that was signed by all 3 of the authors. And I was just a hick from the sticks of Kentucky. I had never met anybody that had written a book before. That was so cool to me to get someone to give me a book that they had signed. So that's probably my favorite.
Yeah, that'd be hard to beat. I like that. All right, what about your favorite book or resource outside of agriculture?
The obligatory one, and everybody's going to think that I just am saying this, but the Bible is still really an important reference book for me.
Also hard to beat. Yeah,
it's very hard to beat. Yeah, and it's just very durable. It's been around for a long time. But probably I travel a lot, so I do a lot of audiobooks, and I actually like to listen to a lot of fiction when I'm driving. So That's probably my next one. Some things like Michael Connolly or um, some of the um, some of those mystery fiction novels are really a lot of fun for me to listen to and read.
Makes sense. Yep. And then, in your opinion, what sets successful dairy professionals apart from those that are less successful?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll say two things. One is vision and investment back into the business. Some of the most amazing people that I've met in my career have been dairy producers or other farmers who had vision, that could see something in a field or in an opportunity that no one else could see. That they saw something that was just phenomenal, and turn it into a very profitable business, an opportunity that no one else really saw. The second thing is they invest back into their business. Like any business, one has to reinvest in their business to be able to grow, to keep up with the growth of the industry. And I think one of the challenges in the dairy industry is with the ebbs and flow of the milk prices in the market, being able to continually set aside 10% or whatever it might be to reinvest into the business is absolutely crucial.
Great point. I think it's particularly hard when you have to make a very large investment, at least every 20 years, right, to at least renovate a parlor, if nothing else. And that's hard to stock away that kind of money. But yeah, you're right. That's a big difference. Well, Dr. Hancock, I have very much enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for sharing some of your wisdom on forages and also an exciting project at the Dairy Forage Research Center. And appreciate you taking the time for this.
My pleasure, and I appreciate the invite.
All right, well, take care. That's another episode of the Dairy Podcast Show. Please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more of these episodes. Take care.